وسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. We will continue from the chapter of Salah. The last lesson we covered some things that are preconditions of namaz. So before the namaz actually even starts, those things or the conditions that need to be fulfilled before the namaz. And briefly covering them, the first was having, this on page number 74. So the first one was to have wudu, or if you need to do ghusl, have a shower, then either have wudu or ghusl, whichever is necessary for you. And the second, your body, clothes, and the place you're going to pray your salah, that needs to be pure as well. And third, you covering your nakedness, your aura. For a man, it was between the navel and the belly button, and the belly button to the bottom of the knees. So this is fard for a man, to minimum requirement to cover, and for a woman, it was the full body except the face, hands, and feet. So the full aura needs to be covered. The next was you need to face the Qibla, followed by it needs to be a prayer time, so you have to pray within a prayer time. So for example, Maghrib started at 4 o'clock, and you started to pray Maghrib at 3:59. Even if you start to pray 1 minute early, your Maghrib doesn't count. So the condition for the namaz is the prayer time has to enter. If the prayer time hasn't entered, the prayer doesn't count. And the sixth was the intention of the salah. So having the intention to pray the namaz. So normally we make the intention, like I mentioned, like culturally, is like, you know, Maneed ki this namaz di padna aas wasta, all this we say, I make the intention to pray for the sake of Allah, to fard of Suffa-tul-islam and so on. This is a verbal, this is not intention. So for example, I said something with my tongue. Imagine I'm about to pray Isha namaz, and I said I'm praying the full fard of Zuhr, Allahu Akbar. I said Zuhr, but my actual intention in my heart and mind, I know fully consciously I'm about to read Isha namaz. I came to left the house, I know it's dark, I've left the house for Isha namaz, I've got to the masjid, and I'm about to start with the imam, and I'm like, in my verbal intention, which is only desirable, the actual intention is what's in your heart and mind. And I actually said 4 o'clock namaz fard of Zuhr, Allahu Akbar. When I started, and then you know, something that happens and you're like, hang on a minute, is that Zuhr? Is it? I was supposed to say Isha. Just because you said it wrong, it doesn't count. In namaz is still fine, because you know in your heart and mind you meant Isha, but your tongue just slipped up. Okay, so it's about the intention. So the condition for your niyat is from your heart. It's not from what your tongue is saying. Even though some people are wrote, or they do say, it's makruh and it's a bid'ah to say Maneed ki tish namaz di, and it's not allowed, and this is innovation, all these extra stories they make. But the Sunni stance is, if someone says you with the tongue, it's still fine. If it's helping to concentrate, because sometimes you know you come to read namaz, but when you say I'm about to read 4 sunnah or 4 fard, you kind of getting yourself into the mental zone of reading namaz. You're getting yourself focused. If it's helping you to concentrate and prepare, and then it's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with making that intention verbally. But bottom line is, the actual intention is from your heart. And then the last one was 7, they mentioned the tahrima, to say the opening Allahu Akbar. And then they mentioned some rare situations where you might not be able to apply these conditions, i.e., for example, wudu. You might not have water, so you can't say, oh, you don't have wudu, because wudu only can be done with water. Hence, the alternative would be to do tayammum. You might not have, it says here, you need your body, clothes, and the place needs to be pure. Imagine you're gone somewhere, the only pair of clothes you have, you're wearing them, and you had a nosebleed and the blood's got on your clothes. You can't wash them because you've got nothing to wash them with. You can't change them because you've got no other clothes to wear. So in that rare situation, you're allowed to read namaz in impure clothes. It's better than reading naked, basically. Right? So either you're going to remove them and have no clothes, or you're going to pray in namaz in filthy clothes. So that's allowed. And that could be like, you know, depends on circumstances. Like we had the brother last time asked a question is the doctor that comes here. Sometimes they he works in a hospital. So imagine they're in the middle of a surgery, and they can't for medical reasons, due to hygiene and all these reasons, they can't change their clothes because they have done the procedure of purifying themselves from all the bacteria and all this and that before they do. So now they're wearing certain clothes, certain equipment that they can't remove, and that might have blood on it which is impure, right? So then that person, due to those circumstances, can keep those clothes on. Another one was about facing the Qibla, which you mentioned as well. You might find yourself in a place where you don't know where the Qibla is. If you've gone on a holiday somewhere you're not accustomed to, or you're traveling somewhere where there's no local mosque, there's no Muslim around, the Qibla compass on your phone, which my experience, they never work. Whenever I try to use them, they always get messed up. But generally from the UK, you don't need these Qibla compass apps. Bottom line is, simple way to find out the Qibla in the UK and to pray namaz correctly. Any compass are 120 degrees. If you put it about 115, 16, 20, anywhere in the UK, your namaz will be fine. So you don't need these Qibla compasses. iPhone naturally comes with one. Just open the iPhone compass and put it to 120 and read your namaz, is fine. And so generally you should know, like obviously there's a science behind it as well, but from the UK it's about 120 degrees. If you face that direction, your namaz will be fine. Another thing that you might not find the Qibla, so now I'm saying I think it's this way because as long as you take an educated guess, and sometimes you might be somewhere like, I don't know the Qibla, the guy's like, I think it's that way, the other one's like, I think it's that way. You're just doing guesses, you're just making it up. Why? Because I feel it's that way. No, as long as it's based on education, like for example, alright, sunrise happens from there, sunset happens from there, I know that's the west, I know that's the east, so Saudi Arabia's more towards the west, so most likely it's over here. Now you're taking an educated guess, you're using your akal, so now even if you're wrong, your namaz is fine. But if you just made it up like, we don't know, man, just read any direction, then that namaz doesn't count. You need to repeat that namaz again. Another scenario was, you're ready to start your namaz, like for example, you go to someone's house and you say, which way is the Qibla? They say, it's face the window. You've gone in, to your understanding, they meant face the window like that, but they actually meant face the window this way. So you've gone in your prayer and they walk in and they're like, no, face the window this way. Even in the middle of your namaz, because you fully intended to do the right direction, you can turn in the namaz. So sometimes like people think namaz breaks, right? So for example, you're praying your salah, Qibla's here, you've taken a full educated guess, but you're actually facing this way. You started and someone says, no brother, it's this way. In your namaz, you're entitled, you're allowed to turn. People think that our namaz breaks, so what they do is, they're facing this way, and someone said it's that way, they're like, oh man, Allah Akbar. They start again. Because you've done it on full knowledge based, you fully thought it's this way, you're fully conscious, aware. If you're wrong and someone tells you whilst in the namaz, you can just turn that way and continue praying. Because you weren't guessing first, you were actually trying your best to go the right direction. So you have to keep that in mind as well. So you can keep that in mind. Another one was that if you read your namaz and then afterwards you found out, you prayed that way, did a full educated guess, and then you were like, for example, you're traveling, you've gone somewhere, and then you prayed your namaz, and a local person comes in, you're like, brother, just out of curiosity, where's the Qibla? You prayed that way, and he said, oh, the Qibla is this way. The namaz you've read is happened, is fine. Because when you prayed it, you've done it with your full knowledge and ability, so that's fine. Because sometimes that happens, in a public place, like a train station, during namaz, or in a hospital or somewhere like that, and they put those arrows there. Some people like Sadaqah Jariyah, they might find the Qibla and put a sticker on the room, the Qibla this way, and then you get someone, a mischief maker, or a person who thinks he's too smart. This normally happens. Like I used to go to college, one day he's in college, he was that way in the hall, and then some bright guy comes and he puts it that way, to his knowledge that way. Then everyone else comes, puts it back that way, and then he comes, whoever that was, I don't know, I never caught that person, but they used to keep changing the sticker because they thought that everyone else is doing wrong and they're right. So hence, obviously some people were following him and some were following the right one. So if it's not your fault, then it's not your fault. So these were like preconditions for namaz. So before you even say Allahu Akbar, all these things need to be done. So wudu, clothes clean, face the Qibla, the namaz time. If you have all of this and one of them is missing, like for example, you don't have your wudu, your clothes are clean, your intention is there for Zuhr, you've got your wudu, you don't have wudu though, for example, right? And you've got all the other things, the time's right, everything's right, the Qibla is the right way. Can you read namaz without wudu? No. If you have everything else and you don't have, it's not the right time. For example, now is Isha time. I've got wudu, I've got clean clothes, I'm facing the right direction, I've made the intention, I've got everything now. But I say, Allahu Akbar, can I read Fajr? I can't. Why? Because one condition is missing, the time. So every single of these conditions need to be met for the namaz to be valid. So these were like preconditions before the namaz even starts. Now they're going to mention conditions inside the namaz. So even the namaz itself has its own fard. Like we say, namaz is farz. But inside the fard, there's certain things that make it fard. If you miss those out, the fard is incomplete. Like for example, zakat, we say is fard. Is it 1%, 2.5, 10%? We say zakat is fard, giving is fard. The quantity, 2.5%, is also fard. Then this kind of person is fard. So there's within a fard, there's also other fard that need to be complete as well. Similarly with the namaz, so the namaz itself is fard. But inside the namaz, what is fard? First thing they mention here, if I've got the right page, this is on page 76. So first thing they mention here, which is difference of opinion, some say it's a precondition, some say it's fard, but just keep it simple, saying Allahu Akbar, the takbir al-tahrima, the first takbir, Allahu Akbar, the initial one to start. And this is the words. So if someone forgot to raise their hands, they were a bit in a rush and they just went Allahu Akbar and they realized, oh, I didn't even pick my hands up. Like sometimes that happens, for example, the imam has started, the guy's rushing in the namaz and he's like, you know what, the imam's going to ruku, I'm going to miss my rakat. So he quickly goes and he's like Allahu Akbar and starts joining the imam. He never raised his hands. As long as he's verbally said it, the fard is complete. Raising your hand like this is sunnat. So if someone forgot to raise their hands, the fard is still done. But obviously if you purposely do it, now you're going to God, you're sinful for missing a sunnah out, abandoning the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, neglecting it. That's a whole different issue. But if you forgot, for example, to raise your hands, as long as you say the fard, which is Allahu Akbar, that's the first fard. The second fard of namaz is the standing. Yeah, so what is considered standing now? So technically they mention that when you stand for namaz, right, as long as your hands can touch your knees, like for example, you might have back pain. So if you can't even touch your knees like this, that means you're standing. If your hands get to a place that you can touch your knees, that's considered ruku now. So as long as your hands, like for example, that's my knee, right? If my hands can't touch my knees, I'm still considered, you know, some people quickly do ruku like this and they don't even touch their knees, for example. If your hands can't touch your knees fully stretched out, that's still considered standing. Soon as your hands touch your knees, that's considered ruku. So that's how you define if you're in ruku or if you're in qiyam, standing or ruku. So until, like for example, this is standing, up to here. Now I can touch my knees, so hence this is called ruku. Even though my back is still slightly arched upwards. Right? Even the sunnah is your back is level. That's why women, they do ruku like this. You see them, they be slightly standing. Because they just about meet the ruku. I'll explain why as well. And so the first condition is you stand up. As long as you can't touch your knees, you consider standing. That's the first fard. The second fard, or the third one, sorry now. So first one was saying Allahu Akbar. The second one is standing. The third fard is reciting anything from Quran. So as long as you read something, one ayat, or you could say, and the shortest ayahs are like 2 words. Yes, so as long as you said 2 words from the Quran, you consider your fard of tilawat done. Alright? So, for example, someone never read Alhamdulillah, they never read Qul Ahad, and they just said Yasin wal Quran al-Hakim. The fard level will be done. Is the namaz done or not? We will discuss that later. But the minimum fard will be done as long as you read anything from Quran. The fourth one, and you know this tilawat one, for example, just before I forget, this tilawat, for example, the takbir is going to be at the start of namaz, right? So the first one is only once, the fard is only once. The qiyam, the standing one, is fard in every rakat. So these 4 rakats, there's 4 standings of farz on you. The tilawat one, in the farz namaz, is only fard in the first 2. Hence, when you read behind an imam, normally he reads loud in the first 2 rakats, right? So tilawat, easy way to understand, in the farz is only the first 2 rakats, or 2 rakats, and in the rest of the namaz, every rakat tilawat is farz. So your 4 sunnahs, tilawat is farz in every rakat. In your 3 witr, in every rakat. In your nafl, every rakat. Only in your fard is only fard in 2 rakats, the tilawat part. And then they mention about ruku. We'll do more detail in this, but I'll just briefly mention the first. Then they mention about ruku. Ruku is, like I mentioned, as long as you can touch your knees, that's considered ruku. Your fard of ruku will be done. That's the minimum requirement. But the sunnah would be to fully take your back and make it the right angle, that's sunnah. But if your back is like this and you can touch your knees, you still done your fard, the minimum requirement. And then the sajda. 2 sajdas are fard in every rakat. So if you did 1 sajda, so you done your first rakat, you done 2 sajdas, second one you do 2 sajdas, third you done 2 sajdas, last one you done 1 sajda, and you realize, you done namaz, you realize I've done 1 sajda and one of them, your namaz is invalid, you missed the fard out. So both sajdas are fard in every rakat, right? Then the 6th one would be the last at-tahiyyat. So you have the last, imagine you do 4 rakats, after 2 rakats you sit down, don't you? In the last one when you sit down, the time span is fard. Not reading the words, at-tahiyyatu lillahi wa salam. If that takes you 30 seconds, those 30 seconds are fard on you. You have to minimum sit those 30 seconds. If you don't sit those 30 seconds, you quickly done salam, your namaz is invalid. Right? So these are the 4 and the 6 fard of namaz, which everyone should know. Because if you slip of one of them, there's ways to fix this as well. For example, if you never stood up, you missed a rakat out. Obviously, you never stood up, that means you missed a rakat. You stand up and you do go back to that fard. Imagine you standing up and you're reading your, any rakat is, you're doing Qul Allahu Samad Lam Yalid Walam. You forgot and you went straight down to sajda. Then you realize, oh, I missed my ruku out. You can reverse from one fard to another fard. So you can reverse and then do your ruku. Because you left a compulsory thing out, so you can reverse from one fard to another fard. Right? But anything lower than a fard that you missed, for example, you started, but you never raised your hands, imagine, right? And you say, Allahu Akbar, Subhanakallah wa bihamdih. Now you do qiyam and now your fard is started, which is standing. You can't go back and say, oh, I never raised my hands, Allahu Akbar. Because that was sunnah. As long as you said the first part, Allahu Akbar, and started, so you can't reverse to something lower on a ranking level. Right? So as long as, so if you, for example, missed out 1 sajda in first rakat, you did 1 sajda, in the second rakat you remembered, oh, I missed 1 sajda last. And the ulama mentioned the easiest way, in the last rakat you add extra sajda, you do 3 sajdas. So if you know you missed a sajda, then you can make up that sajda by doing an extra one at the end. So now you've got all the 8 sajdas, if it's 4 rakats, or if it's 2 rakats, you've got the 4 sajdas. Also another thing it would be like, for example, you went to, you're supposed to do 2 sajdas, right? And you partially stood up for the second rakat, then you realize, oh, I haven't done my sajda yet. You can't go back down because you haven't really missed it out by 2-3 other actions. You're just about moving off. You stood up and then you realize, oh, I missed a sajda. You can go back, do your sajda, and then come back up and stand up. As long as you're going back to a fard. Yeah? If you're going back to any wajib action, which is also compulsory, then you basically left a higher action for a lower one, and that's not allowed. Just some side notes which are common topics as additional information I give you. So we got the 6 farz of namaz now. Allahu Akbar, standing, just the standing part, not the extra. Tilawat of any part of Quran, as long as you read 1, 2, 3, something from Quran, 1 ayah, and then ruku, 2 sajdas, and the last time span of at-tahiyat, the time span. So whatever it takes you, 40 seconds, 30 seconds, that time span. These are 6 farz of namaz. Now with the starting one, they just mentioned some side things, information, is it mentions in a hadith sharif that when you stand up, you and which a popular group is usually on social media, that you should join your feet when you read namaz. There is a hadith that says join your feet, but none of the 4 schools have ever from the scholars in the past, in the last 1200 years, have ever understood that to mean that you actually join your feet like these guys do these days. The ulama, when they explain this hadith, they say, firstly, in them days, the person who was narrating it was a young person, a child, like a young person. So he must have been in the child's saf. So for them, children to join the lines together, they were told to join shoulder to shoulder, feet to feet, the line goes straight. Obviously, now we got all these carpets, and even in these carpets, people can't stand straight, right? So in them days, they weren't on carpets, they were reading on a desert. So even if they had something, it would be plain, it wouldn't be like softs made like this. They had to practically make the softs themselves by joining the shoulders together. The line would be straight. Hence, they were told shoulder to shoulder, feet next to each other. It'll straighten the line, and then they put the feet the way they would do normally. But the shoulders stayed attached. Right? So that's the understanding of that hadith. So it doesn't literally mean that you keep your feet joined together, which people do, and they say, once when I started studying and I went to a masjid and I was walking with my teacher to the masjid, and this guy's doing, there's a space, there's like a pillar here, and there's space for 2 people to fit in that gap. Easily 2 people would fit in there. Because the pillar's there, and people exaggerate, shaitan will come in the gap. Because that's a hadith, right? So what this guy did was, so imagine that's the pillar. He would have stand here, I comfortably could have fit in there. Because the hadith they use of the shaitan, that hadith is there. There shouldn't be any gaps between yours, or the shaitan interferes. So in the same mention, they join your feet as well. So hence they join their feet, and then they join their arms as well. So this guy obviously had no one there, so he's joined the wall like this. Right? So this how people illogically apply that. And now you're taking 2, and then when I was walking around, I can remember my teacher, like, he's saying for a joke, but he meant he was serious. Like, he said, this guy thinks the shaitan will go, I'm sure the shaitan will fit under those legs. If you're standing like this, to leave it 2 musalleh out here. So obviously you defeat the whole purpose of the wisdom behind the whole action, right? So, because obviously now, those people, they start thinking, I know better than this guy, look how he's standing, I'm going to show him how to stand. That is the shaitan waswasa. Like pride and arrogance that I'm better than this guy, and I'm going to show him, I'm going to show splits. You move your foot this way, they put the foot on top of you. You move a bit more, they put it more on top of you. This is against the adab of the namaz. Right? If the guy doesn't want, because you can get foot infections and all this, athlete's feet and all that. Right? That's another topic. But generally, so the shoulder one that's not a joke though. The feet one, you keep your feet to yourself. The ulama mentioned it should be at least your shoulder width at least. Right? So minimum up to 4 fingers, and maximum at least up to your shoulder width, which would be like, you can say a hand span. If you spread your hand like this, then that would be in line with the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So at least you should do that. But for women, and then the hadith for standing, for example, I'll tell the extra sunnah parts as well. These are extra sunnah. So the standing itself is the first part. These are extra sunnah. Like the Maliki say, the sunnah is to put your arms on your side like this. Hence, you see, you might walk in a mosque and someone's doing like this. Normal person will say, he's a Shia or something. I don't know, people make their own theories, right? But the Maliki stance is, the whole purpose is to be humble before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hence, their way is they put your arms on your side and you do namaz. Then you get a hadith that says, you put your hand on your chest, which some groups only apply that one and they think that's the only way. Either that way or no, the rest of you are all misguided and this and that. And then the other hadith is you place it below your navel. Like the Shafis have taken this one, Imam Malik has taken this one, the Malikis, and the Hanafis have taken this one and this one. Why? Because what's the advice to the women? You put your hand in the Hanafi school, you put your hands up here for the women, and for the men, and down here. So in the Hanafi school, both are applied. But another thing that's applied in the Hanafi school is that for a woman, for example, the rules slightly change. Even though some of them you won't find them literally written clear cut in the hadith. So the first one is that women in the Hanafi school, they join their feet together. When they do sajda, it mentions that when you do sajda, don't put your arms on the floor, your elbows, your wrists, yeah, forearms, like a dog basically. Don't keep your body spread open. Your sunnah is your arm doesn't touch your body. So everything is spread open. Neither is it touching the floor, neither is it squeezed together. Obviously, if you're in Jamaat in less space, then it's fine. But generally, you read with your elbows off the ground. But if you look at the Hanafi namaz, the women are told to read with their arms on the floor, right, with their elbows on the floor. And also in the normal sunnah method of doing sajda, the back side basically is raised up. But what happens is, Imam Abu Hanifa, and this is what knowledge is, you have to read between the lines as well. The Hanafi school, they say that covering the modesty for a woman is farz. Now, if a woman would read namaz where a man does spread out like this, she's going to cause more fitna. Most people are going to get distracted if they see a woman reading namaz like that. So, for modesty and haya, which is farz on her, she reads the namaz as if she's all crouched up. Hence, like for example, the sunnah is your thighs and your stomach don't touch. But in the Hanafi school, the woman reads namaz as her stomach and her thighs will touch. Her elbows will be on the floor. She doesn't raise her back when she does sajda. She still stays flat on the ground. So why? Because in the Hanafi school, the fard part, which is the haya and the modesty and the sharm, that is given priority. So in the Hanafi school, because that's fard to do parda and not expose herself, hence she won't pray like the way the man does. So, but then you get people these days saying Imam Abu Hanifa didn't know hadith, and how could they tell women to read namaz like that when the hadith says chapre with the spread yourself out, right? So, but this is immodest for a woman to do that. Hence, like even for example, why is it makruh for a woman to give azan? Because her voice is a parda as well. Her voice is a aura as well. The way her body is parda, she has to hide it. Same with her voice. So hence, she shouldn't be. Why can a woman be imam? She knows all the rules, she might know all the fiqh. Because no one's going to be focusing on namaz when they're standing behind her. They're going to be focusing on her, checking her out. These are wisdoms behind the Sharia as well. It's not just about do's and don'ts, the reasons why. Now, for example, a woman's giving azan or reading tilawat in public, which they do on social media, and that is guna, for example, right? But most guys, even if women lectures who give these nice fancy speeches, most guys, naturally men are designed like this. Instead of listening to the Allah Akbar, Allah is the great, they be like, oh, she sounds alright, she's got a nice voice. This is human nature, this is man's nature. So hence, when the ulama give rulings, it's not only about what the hadith says, literally, even though those things are in the Quran and hadith as well, is having the knowledge of, the hadith on this topic of namaz, how to read namaz, but what did the Sharia say about parda and haya and modesty? What did the Quran and hadith also say about these other aspects? Now, combining all this knowledge, then you get to a conclusion. So, but these days when they say, Bukhari says this though, and the right Bukhari and the hadith is there, and unpopular person like me is like, bro, he says the Bukhari, man, the Hanafis are wrong, these Pakis reading wrong. That's what people literally say. These do not know, they're backwards. Bukhari says this, I read in Bukhari, right? But the knowledge of all these ulama has been coming for all these years. So that's why in the Hanafi school, you might see the why does a woman read namaz like this. Even like, for example, when a man, Sunnah is to raise the hands to the ears. For a woman, Sunnah is to raise it to her shoulders. Why? Because when she does this, she's exposing herself. Because when she's wearing her scarf and she raises her hands, now her upper body is being exposed. Hence, when she does it, she keeps her hands tucked underneath her hijab. And so she reads even her namaz in parda as well, in modesty as well. So these things have been kept in mind generally in the Hanafi school. So you don't need to keep your feet together. For a woman, a namaz, reading tucked away, reading with parda and haya, modesty, that is the proper way. And you might think that women don't read namaz here anyway, they read at home. But when you go in public places, like for example, you go to Makkah Sharif, you're trying to do tawaf, and a woman's fully, reading namaz, but in that way, the way they say that a man should pray, the guys, instead of doing tawaf, he's been thinking about something else, right? So all these things need to be kept in consideration. And when ulama give a fatwa or they give a ruling, they look at more than just what the line says. They have all the different sciences in their mind, different topics, different scenarios in mind as well. If you read traditional fiqh books, like this is just catered for our level or translated. But if you read traditional books, they give you scenarios that are made up. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? Like you mentioned about the aura, they mentioned, like for example, what if you haven't grown arm clothes? That's a rare situation in your life you're going to find that you never had any clothes, but it's possible. So they're also giving answers how to read namaz like that and so on. So it's important to keep all these things in mind. So these were the further action of namaz. So Allahu Akbar, standing, ruku, reading anything from the Quran, doing the 2 sajdas in every rakat. And that means that your forehead and your nose both should touch the ground. And the condition of sajda also is, right, that your feet can't be lower than, like you could say, about a foot. Probably less than a foot, just say your forearm, right? That probably is about 25-30 centimeters. It can't be that lower than your head. So sometimes you might be reading on a slanted place, you're reading on a hill or something. If your feet and your head have that much of a difference, then you're more inclined towards standing. So that won't count. So the difference between where your feet are and where your head's gonna go, it shouldn't be more than like 25-30 centimeters. If it is like, for example, you're reading somewhere, obviously it might be tall, so it's gonna be a hill like this. So if your feet are there and your head's going up that high, then that is not considered as sajda, because you're too high. So it should be a slope at least this much, right? So that needs to be considered. So when you do sajda, how high your head will go. So another masla tying in this. Do you have a question? I thought you'd be on before question. So another masla tying with this would be, for example, now you need to do sajda, right? And you've had injury. So sometimes you have an operation, nose operation or something, that you can't put your head on the floor. So maybe you fell down, you got stitches on your forehead. Right? So now if you put your head down because you got stitching done, you might cause an infection and stuff like that. So how do you pray in namaz? As long as you can go into the limits of the sajda, but you got medical reason not to put your forehead down, you still have to go into the boundary of the sajda and still do as much as you can. But if you can't go into the limits of the sajda, which was a damage difference, so that also matters. Like for example, I'm saying that here. So if I'm saying that here, and that would mean the ground is 0 and I'll be here. So if due to injury, a climb will go down this much, like imagine that's the most I can go. Now I'm not getting to the boundary of sajda. Hence, I'm not qualified to do sajda. But if you can go all the way down, but you can't put it down because maybe some of an illness or you might have some infection or something that might get triggered, then you can still go and stay in the limit and come back up. But obviously there's a valid reason why you're not touching it down, as long as you can go inside the limits of the sajda. But if you can't do that, then the sajda is excused from you altogether. So they're going to mention that part. They might not, so I have to mention it myself. But So they mentioned here, I didn't know they mentioned here, but the feet can't be, or the forehead can't be higher, they've given 25 centimeters. So the difference between your feet and your head, it can't be more than 25 centimeters. That's what they mentioned here. And they mentioned again, both sajdas are fard. Another thing that they mentioned here, well, I can't see it, but I know it's somewhere here, but about the standing part. Like for example, you can't stand in namaz, because standing is fard, isn't it? So imagine you twisted your ankle in football, you can't stand up now. So what do? You read in namaz sitting down. But what people do, they read on the chair. That's not what the sitting means. Sitting means that you sit on the floor. If you still can do your ruku and sajda, like sitting down on the floor, you still do your ruku and sajda. You know, like when people read two nafal and they sit down and read. If you still can pray like that, then you need to pray like that. So, or you stand up and pray in namaz. Right? So if you're standing up, you can't stand up because of an injury, so you have to sit down. Sit down means you do the sunnah sitting first. All the sunnah methods, which is crossing your legs, sitting at tahiyat, for example. If you can't do like that, then you sit with your legs stretched out. Or if you can't do that, then at least sit in cross-legged. But you still sit down and you still do what you can do. Another thing that they mentioned here is that, for example, you might not be able to do sajda for a reason. Like people get old, for example, and they can't go down to do sajda, but they can stand up. Hence you see the elderly in mosques, they stand up and then they sit down for sajda, right? Or if they can sit down and read the full namaz, they're not qualified to stand and sit on the chair. But what happens, you get a lot of beef in mosques, the Baba say, who the hell is he to tell me? And then the Imam goes quiet and then he doesn't say. But it's still the Imam's job. Hence, you only see one chair or two chairs in this mosque. Because as soon as I personally see someone that he's qualified to stand and do the namaz without the chair, my job is to tell him. And hence, you only put two chairs here, so no one gets. But in other mosques, like my local mosque in Birmingham, there's like two safs with about 40 people and 30 armchairs. that literally happens. The first two safs are booked for chairs, and the Baba don't let you move. But I know those same guys are the committee members and the khazanchis and this and that of the mosque. All day they've been talking at the back, chilling. They'll be outside, and they're also part of the politics and local MPs and that as well. And they'll be standing outside doing the politics for 3 hours outside the mosque. When he comes inside, they read the namaz on the chair, right? So, but when the Imam does tell them, he gets a sack. Hence, there's 50 guys on the chair and 10 are standing. And so, unfortunately, namaz won't happen like that. So if you look at footnote 214, it says, standing is defined as a person who to extend his hand. I mentioned this part already. So if you can touch your knees, that means you're standing. It says, according to the majority, one's feet should be ideally, we've done this part by the feet. This is considered an emphasis. And also mentioned about the touching of the feet. That's not right. Another thing I mentioned is 215 footnote. It says now about physically being able to stand. What if you can't stand? Sometimes you can stand but you can't do ruku because your back's hurting. Sometimes you can stand and do ruku but you can't do sajda. But sometimes you can do ruku and sajda but you can't stand. So there's different variations of what's depending on your injury, right? So they're mentioning here, what if you're not physically able to stand? So they're going to give you a few scenarios. They say that is, if one is physically able to stand and perform sujood, then standing is fard on him. If you can stand and you can do sajda, then your standing is fard on you. Then hence, it still remains fard. He said, if he's unable to stand, or if standing is very difficult, i.e. he's got a football injury, he's twisted his ankle, he can't put his weight on it, that would be a legit reason. It won't be that my ankle is a bit hurting, so I'm going to sit down today or whatever. It has to be authentic, like you got some serious ligament damage that you can't actually stand. It has to be a legit reason. It can't be just made up, or just you're trying to fool someone else. You can't fool Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, if you're in a situation that you can't stand, then you may pray sitting down, yet still do the ruku and sajda. And that ruku, sitting down, is not the chair. That sitting down is sitting, like I mentioned, the sunnah ways. Either in at-tahiyyat, if you can sit like that. If you can't sit like that, you sit in cross-legged. If you can't sit like that, then you can sit with your legs stretched forward towards the qibla. So if you will sit like this and still do your ruku and your sajda if you're able to. He said, then he mentions here that if you're unable to stand and you're not able to even do sajda, that would be that you can't stand and you can't do sajda. Then he must pray with head movements. Then the ishara namaz comes in. For example, someone's gone to hospital, they just had a stroke or something. Namaz is still formed, but the person can't get off his bed now. Hence, they read the namaz but with ishara with their head. So standing would be normal like this, ruku would be like this, and sajda will be more down. That's the same with elderly people at home who can't get up, stand up and read namaz, or they can't go on the floor to do sajda. If you can't stand up and sit down like that, then you're qualified to sit down in namaz, read namaz, but your namaz will be with ishara, right? So you can't be doing half and a half in that sense. Then he mentions here that person can also read namaz standing up. So imagine I can't do sajda, or some people say I can't go down because I've got an injury, I can't do sajda. So even if they're in the masjid, they should ideally read namaz like this. So imagine I can't do sajda for a reason, right? But I can't stand, I can't do ruku. What do people do? They grab a chair, don't they? Even young guys, for some reason they can't go down, he must have broken a foot, for example, so it's hard for him to go down physically. So he can't stand though, and he can't do ruku, so his namaz would be standing. And he'll still do his ruku, he'll go down, less for ruku and more for sajda. But he's still reading his namaz standing up if he's able to stand. Hence, it's better to stand than still use the chair. So if you can't do the standing part, then you read your namaz, but going a bit down for ruku and then more for sajda, but you do the whole thing standing up. So that's the proper way to do it instead of getting a chair. The chair should, ideally like this kind of chair should be as the last means. Like one of my ustads in Birmingham, Imam Sahib, they're old now, they're like 80 years old. They do the whole namaz, till this day they try their best to do sitting down. And even when they sit down, because they can't sit down, they sit like this. They're like 80 years old, they sit like this. As long as they do this sajda like this. But because it's so hard for them, the fard still try to do that. But then because you got leeway with your sunnahs and nafal, because they can't pray normal, but they can sit like this. So they read the rest of the namaz like this, and then they read with ishara because they can't physically do sajda ruku properly because of health. So they do this for ruku and then more down for sajda. Another myth is made up is, what people do is when they're reading, sitting down on a chair, for example, right? And for ruku they do, or sajda, they do this in the air. There's no such concept. That is all made up. Like doing that, so keep your hands in the air. Like this is what ruku when they do this, right? And then for sajda they do this. That is not true. That is just something you should add it on. The proper way is, like I mentioned, if you can't do it, you can't do it. Simple. So what you do, your head is considered by your head movement then. As long as your head is going more down for sajda than ruku, then it's fine. Same with your person, like for example, you're in a plane, you do your namaz in a plane, you can't get up and read somewhere, there's no health and safety, you can't read anywhere, so you can read your namaz in your seat. So how would you read? You can't do sajda, you can't do ruku, you can't stand up in your seat. Hence, imagine if I'm on my seat, as long as I go more down, this is my ruku for example, so I've got up to here, my sajda will have to be more than this. So I have to bend my back more for the ruku, then I'm more for sajda for the ruku. Than the ruku. So as long as you do those things, then namaz is fine. But if your ruku was lower than your sajda, then that namaz is invalid because you messed it up. It has to be you're doing more for your ruku, your sajda than your ruku. So these things are just generally that they mentioned. So this standing information that I told you all about the standing, you can't stand, how to read namaz, this is only for farz namaz. Because we know for nafal namaz anyway, you can sit down and read nafal, right? So nafal, broadly speaking, like I mentioned last week, is anything apart from farz. So for example, in the Isha namaz, we have 4 farz and the 3 witr. Apart from them, 2 things, all is sunnahs and all is nafal. Everything else, broadly speaking, falls into nafal. Yeah, so that's what nafal means. Nafal means something other than the fard. Easy to put it. Anything which is additional to the fard is called nafal. Then the nafal is like the subcategory. So you have, like, for example, fard. Then you have two types of fard. My personal fard, which is my daily prayers, and then a community fard like janazah namaz. So if someone passed away in Luton, 5 guys read the namaz, the gunnah is gone from everyone. No one gets sin for it. They done the fard and are part of the community. But my 5 daily prayers, Zohr, Fajr, Asr, they're individual fards. So fard have 2 categories, personal and community. Then nafal, nafal has sunnah muakkada, sunnah ghair muakkada, mustahab, and so on. And then you have those different categories of nafal. Normally people say nafal, do nafal in namaz. Nafal, then you have nafal which are emphasized sunnahs, nafal which are normal sunnahs, and then nafal which we consider to be nafal, which is the optional ones. Right? So broadly speaking, in fiqh books, anything apart from fard is considered nafal. So when they say here that standing is only fard, they mean in the 4 fards, like for example the fard namaz, so the 2 fard of Fajr, 4 of Zohr, 4 of Asr, 3 of Maghrib, and 4 of Isha, and 2 additional things to this, the 3 witr and the 2 sunnahs of Fajr. Because the 2 sunnahs of Fajr, they're the highest level of any sunnah. So they're the closest to the fard possible, so they still need to be done standing up. Apart from them, the rest of the things can technically be still read sitting down. But obviously, you lose half the reward. You get half the reward for sitting down or reading any namaz. So if you've done 2 nafal standing up, 2 nafal sitting down, just imagine the same standard, you get half the reward because you've never done half the action, which is half the effort you put in basically.
So if you're doing namaz standing up, what about the attahiyat? Where would your hand be then?
Yeah, so standing up namaz would be like this. Like for example, Allahu Akbar is normal. Ruku will be normal. Then when stand up from Ruku is normal. Then sajda, if you need to go more down, for example you're doing ishara, right? Then you have to go more down for just in comparison to what you did for Ruku.
Yeah.
Right? But for attahiyat, your hands will be on your side.
Yes.
Yeah, so you attahiyat lillahi. Because you got nowhere to put them. Yeah, some people might say they do this. Those things are just additional. Same as to what I mentioned about when they read namaz like this and they do this for move their hands forward when they're sitting down and reading. You don't need to. What's considered is your back or your head movement because you're reading with ishara. Right? If you can't even move your head, then your eyes, you read with the ishara of your eyes. But namaz, this is the beauty, the importance of namaz. Like we overlook it. We're watching a football match, the World Cup's going on, yeah? So people are watching a football match, I gotta watch the last 10 minutes, chalo, I'll read my Maghrib afterwards. They miss the full namaz over a football match. I'm chilling, I've got this work to do, I've got something to do, they miss the namaz over whatever it is, right? But even on your deathbed, namaz is still farm. They mention, like for example, in fiqh books, a woman, she's in labor, imagine that's experience of life and death. And as long as if namaz kicks in and she's in labor, she has to read the namaz, no matter what. Yeah, as long as obviously if she starts giving birth, the blood comes out, then impurity, wuzu broke, and that's obviously she move on to the next stage. But if she's still in labor and nothing has kicked off yet, but she's still in labor and she's at that peak point, namaz kicks in, you have to read namaz no matter what. That's how important namaz is, and we miss namaz over something so trivial, watching TV, going out for a meal with the boys, something so trivial, and then we miss the namaz. But if you keep all these things in mind, then that's what they say, as-salatu miftahul jannah. One of the biggest pleasures that we're going to get is the Jannah, the heaven Allah's promised us, right? better than any gift in this world. All the wealth of this world, all the things of this world. But the key to that is namaz. So imagine how important the namaz is to get such a, a gift that's going to be forever. Your Jannah is going to be there forever. So if you want to be in a place forever and ever with the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it's not going to be easy to get in there. So the main thing is you hold on to your namaz.
After she gives birth, will she have to make up the namaz or if she missed it?
As in?
Like, let's say namaz came, but she had to give the baby.
Yeah, so then you have to make the namaz up. Yeah, so any namaz that you missed, for example, whatever reason you want to give, right? If you were present at that namaz time, mentally as well, then like the condition for namaz are what? You have to be a Muslim, you have to be an adult, and you have to be sane. You can't be mental, basically, right? So if your akal is still there, you're mentally still there, and you're an adult, and you're a Muslim, namaz is farz on you. So no matter what situation you find yourself in, you missed it, you still have to do qaza of the namaz. And people do qaza over petty things, and they think they're going to make up for it. They're like, oh, we're going out with the boys, chalo qaza karenge sa. And elderly ladies, or ladies especially do this, they go to a matam and they're like, or they go to a shadi, they put some makeup on, right? And they're like, put in namaz qaza karenge sa. Like, one of my elderly relatives, she approached me at a wedding, she's like, kya kara, thakki janiya, shadi brachniya. So, ठीक है ना मैं कज़ा करेंगे करना नमाज़ां सारियां. So they go party all day in the shadiyan, and then they do qaza in the night for all Fajr, Zohar, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. It doesn't work like that. Qaza is when you missed it for a valid reason, and you legit, like, for example, I put my alarm on for Fajr and I slept on time. I've done all my things that I need to do, and I still missed Fajr. You don't get guna, because if you slept on time, you put your alarm on, you done your full preparation for Fajr, and then before you realized, before you got mentally aware of what you're doing, and you realize, oh, I missed Fajr, sunrise has happened. Now you still have to do qaza in either way, even if you skipped it. But that's a legit qaza. That's the role of a qaza. You do qaza then, but you don't get guna for it, because you've done all your precautions. You slept on time, you put your alarm on, you've done all the setting for the Fajr namaz, and you still missed it. You're not sinful. But if you were up to 3 in the morning watching a movie, you put your alarm on, then you're like, oh, I missed my alarm and I'm so tired. Now you're sinful. Why? You should have slept on time. And I mentioned the hadith around that it's makruh to stay up after Isha and talk and chant about. Why? Because it leads to being neglectful of your namaz and fajr. So these things need to be kept in mind.
Nowadays, even I've heard a lot of people that say, oh, you can just do qaza. If you're coming from Manchester on the way back on Maghrib, they say you can just do qaza.
So that's what I'm saying, this is what they do. Like for traveling, for example, I'm going out. I love the lads, they go like Manchester, we're going London, we're going here, we're going there. Namaz time happens over there, come back and do qaza. Or janaza happens somewhere out of town, and you're on the motorway, Maghrib kicks in and they're like, go to car, qaza karenge. It doesn't work like that. If it kicks in, as long as you got the control of the vehicle, which you would, like a plane you don't have control of, a train you don't have control of, a ship you don't have control of. As long as you've got control and you've got the choice, you have to get off and read your namaz. Right? The things you don't have control of, you still read your namaz, but you can read it on there now. Like for example, on a plane, you can't imagine there's less water on the plane, health and safety, they don't let you do wudu on the plane. You still, when Imam mentioned, even if you can't even do wuzu on a plane, you, out of the respect for the time of namaz, you pretend you're reading namaz. You don't do it because it's haram to read namaz without wudu. But you pretend you're reading namaz because you to remind yourself, I'm still conscious of the namaz, but Allah, I can't do it because I've got nothing to do tayammum with, no water, no nothing. I can't do wudu, can't pray myself. I'm still out of adab for the namaz, I'm going to pretend I'm doing it. When I get off, I'm going to do qaza and pray properly. Right? But generally, if you're traveling, you pull over, service station, do your wudu, read your namaz. You have no excuse to do qaza. If you do, you've done a gunai kabira, major sin, by missing your namaz. So this is something that needs to be kept in mind. And when generally, like whenever you plan something, we'll finish here anyway, but generally when you plan something, then plan your time, your journey, whatever it is around namaz. Like even like for example, a wedding hall you're booking for someone, your child or whoever's getting married, right? You know the people are gonna be made them do the makeup, they're gonna be fully blasted, and so do it at a time when they won't miss namaz. For example, if it's summer, okay, do the hall in the evening. By the time they get to the wedding hall, everything, they will have read Maghrib, they've done the salah, they've got, for example, the winter, they've got all night to read Isha. So after the wedding, they come back in, they get back 2 in the morning, they can still read it, clean themselves, take the makeup off, do the wudu, and read namaz. But if you're putting it like, for example, it's winter time, and you book the hall in the morning, Zohr's in makeup, Asr's in makeup, Maghrib's in makeup, Isha's in makeup, now it's your fault for not planning it properly. So if even brides who full on read namaz, on the wedding they miss namaz. Why? Because I've just paid £600 to get my makeup done and this and that. I'm not gonna take this off. So it's your responsibility, generally speaking, wherever you go, you're going on a holiday, you're going abroad. Okay, what time's the flight? Where am I gonna be for Zohar? It shouldn't be, like what we do 3-4 days in advance, we're ready and bags are packed, have I got this, have I got that, have I got that? And then last minute we get to the airport, namaz we padne si. Is there any place to read namaz? Or having a wuzu, or this the issue now, this that. Those are all excuses, they won't be counted. Okay, tomorrow's my flight, it should be okay. We are going to read namaz, take a 5 minutes every time. Okay, Zohar kicks at 2 o'clock, I'll be on the motorway. I'll leave a bit early so I can stop at a service station, read namaz. I'll do this. 4 plan a day according to your namaz. Okay, this one will be on the plane. What time does it kick in? I have to read it mid-air. Where am I going to be? You have a rough idea anyway. The journey is 5 hours. I'm going to be flying over, I don't know, Italy. What time does Isha kick in Italy? And according to like that, this is your responsibility as a Muslim. And sometimes people make excuses. Those excuses won't be valid. We can find the plane tickets, the cheap ones, and bookings, and all this, and bargains online. I'm sure, one click, what time is Maghrib in Italy? It'll come up straight away. What time is Isha namaz in so and so country? It'll give you the time. As soon as you're crossing over, okay, this namaz is kicked in, and you read your namaz. Look at the window, you see it's gone dark, Chalo Isha's kicked in. If the sun has set, Maghrib has kicked in. If it's still light, it's Asr. Obviously, you have to judge it according to your own circumstances. So please, these things keep in mind. But next lesson and this lesson tying together, so it's important that if you can, inshallah, try to attend next lesson as well. These are the further of the namaz. The next are the wajib actions. When you say do sajda sahw, sajda forgetfulness in your namaz, that's with the next things. If these main things and first ones are missed, your namaz gone altogether, you repeat the namaz. The next one that tie in with this is like reading Surah Fatiha and stuff like that. Then if you miss those, your namaz can still be made up by doing the sajda forgetfulness. If you miss the sajda forgetfulness, then the whole namaz has to be repeated. So that'll be next lesson will be the list of those things. So there's quite a lot of those. Here they mention, this book they mentioned 13 things which are wajib. So the fard and the wajib, if you done them, your namaz is sorted. The rest are sunnahs. So if you accidentally miss the sunnah, your namaz will still be valid. But if you miss these first 2, then your namaz can be totally invalid if you've got your sajda sahab. So inshallah, if you have any questions, feel free to message me, text me. I have them prepared for the next lesson. I'll address them first. But you can ask inside the class as well, inshallah. آمين اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا. وصلى الله تعالى على حبيبه محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.